the challenger being presented by his manager, Percival Pringle III, from the state of Minnesota at 245 pounds, former world heavyweight champion, Ravishing Rick Rude.
Richard Irwin Rude was born December 7, 1958 in St. Peter, Minnesota, but grew up with his parents, his sisters Sherry, Nancy, Kathy, and Marcy, and brother Michael, in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. It wasn't until Rude began attending Robbinsdale High School that, at least in hindsight, things started to cast a reflection of his future. Rick's closest childhood friend was Kurt Hennig, the son of Larry the Axe Hennig, who was one of the top stars in the American Wrestling Association, while Rick and Kurt were teenagers. Among Rick's other classmates at Robbinsdale High School were Tom Zink, Dean Peters, Scott Simpson, John Nord, and Barry Darsow. All of them, under one name or another, would find varying degrees of success in pro wrestling. After graduating high school in 1976, Rude attended Anoka Ramsey Community College, where he earned a degree in physical education. Rude then took a job as a bouncer at a Minneapolis bar called Grandma B's, a blue-collar bar on the northeast side that had quickly earned a reputation for being a rough place. Thinking it was temporary employment before putting his degree to work, Rude was reunited with classmates Barry Darsow and John Nord, who were also bouncers at the bar. Rick befriended three other bouncers working at Grandma B's: Michael Higstrand, Joe Laurinaitis, and Scott Norton, and took up competing in arm wrestling contests. All the while, Rude had no idea he would never make use of his degree, thanks to the man standing behind the bar. The bartender at Grandma B's was Eddie Shyman, a former pro wrestler who appeared under the name Eddie Sharkey through the 1960s and even tagged with Larry Hennig to challenge for the AWA World Tag Team Championship in 1963. By the time he was bartending at Grandma B's, Sharkey had already played a part in training the likes of Jesse Ventura, Paul Ellering, and the reigning World Wrestling Federation champion Bob Backlund. Looking at the bouncers working the bar in 1982, Sharkey saw the future of pro wrestling. All six of the bouncers agreed to enter training to be pro wrestlers, and the timing couldn't have been better for Rude and his 5 co-workers. Several other pro wrestlers from the AWA who were unhappy with the organization approached Sharkey about starting his own independent promotion. Sharkey did, with the foundation of what would become Pro Wrestling America and his new trainees and on the ground floor. With cards held in small venues like nightclubs and VFW halls, Rude and the others cut their pro wrestling teeth in the fledgling promotion before some of them moved on to bigger territories. Rude and Joe Laurinaitis eventually landed in the Carolina-based Mid-Atlantic. Rude's first recorded match in Jim Crockett's promotion was against Laurinaitis on November 1, 1982 in Greenville, South Carolina, in an opening match time-limit draw. Rude worked under the name Ricky Rude, while Laurinaitis was billed as Joe Laurin. Rude and Laurinaitis faced each other 4 times in their first week in Mid-Atlantic, all opening the card and trading wins back and forth. By the end of the month, Rude was already getting his first shot at the title, sort of, when he was in a 22-man battle royal for the vacant NWA Television Championship, which was won by Leroy Brown. While his physique was certainly turning heads, Rude was still green and spent most of his time in Mid-Atlantic in opening matches and jobbing to stars like Sergeant Slaughter and Greg Valentine. By the end of 1982, Rude hit the road to get experience, with short swims through the Continental Wrestling Association and Vancouver All-Star Wrestling. In June 1983, Rick landed in Georgia Championship Wrestling, where he was greeted by familiar faces. Within his first month in Georgia, Rude tagged with Joe Lightfoot in a tournament to crown new national tag team champions. The team would lose in the first round to a new tag team known as the Road Warriors, made up of 2 men he had worked with just a year earlier at Grandma B's, Joe Laurinaitis and Michael Higstrand, now known as Animal and Hawk, respectively. While Hawk and Animal had a rocket strapped to their back, Rude was still finding his footing in pro wrestling. In a short run in Georgia, Rude did get wins over notable talent like Bob Roop and Killer Tim Brooks during house shows, but still found himself losing to Larry Zbyszko and Mr. Wrestling. Still, Rude was being established as an up-and-coming future star on World Championship Wrestling, which carried over to a longer run in the Louisiana-based Mid-South territory. In Mid-South, Rude picked up a few wins in the lower mid-card over the likes of Rip Rogers, but perhaps his most notable match was tagging with Mike Jackson as the first opponents of a new tag team called the Midnight Express, Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton. Rude would also have a short-lived tag team with Lanny Poffo that had a series of matches against Condrey and Eaton in December 1983 and January 1984. Years later, Midnight Express manager Jim Cornette told of Condrey's frustration with the still green Rude, but the physically impressive Minnesota native was still turning heads. It was also during Rude's Mid-South run that he actually had his first match in World Class, coming into Dallas for a single match at the Sweathotorial on January 6, 1984, and mistakenly announced as Rick Rudd. Rick was squashed by Kamala in just under 2 minutes in that debut that would long be forgotten by the time Rude made his next appearance in World Class. In late 1983 and early 1984, Mid-South owner Bill Watts arranged a talent exchange with Continental Wrestling Association owner Jerry Jarrett. With Mid-South struggling and looking to change their direction, the CWA sent Watts booker Bill Dundee, along with other notable talent including the Rock and Roll Express and Terry Taylor. In exchange, Mid-South sent Jarrett young wrestlers that included Larry Higgins, Jim Neidhart, and Rick Rude. It would turn out to be a key move for Rude that laid the foundation for the rest of his career. Being paired with manager Jimmy Hart, Rude would become a heel for the first time in his career. At Hart's urging, Rude changed the spelling of his last name to R-U-D-E to put more emphasis on the heelish figure they hoped to build, and preceded his name with the word Ravishing. Rick would be a self-aggrandizing pretty boy, more impressed with his own looks than that of the pretty blonde valet Angel that accompanied him to the ring. Instead of simply wearing standard wrestling trunks, Rick wore garb inspired by the Chippendales dancers and tights with the full-length legs. Introduced as being from Beverly Hills, California, Ravishing Rick Rude made his debut in a televised match on January 24, 1984, defeating Jerry Gray in about 2.5 minutes. It wasn't long before Rude was involved in his first feud, a short program with Dutch Mantell that led into a bigger conflict with Austin Idol. The Idol feud started as something of a battle of the braggarts. Idol showed video of himself working out on the Memphis television show and made comments directed at Rude's valet Angel. Later, Rude came out for an interview with announcer Lance Russell, claiming he didn't need to work out to get the body he had and calling Idol a fat slob who should do his talking in the ring. When Austin reemerged to confront Rude, the Ravishing One began to backpedal, saying he was misunderstood and wanted to be just like Idol. The confrontation ended with Idol slapping Rude and Rude abruptly walking off set. Rude refused to appear on Memphis television until Idol apologized, sending Angel a pre-written apology to be signed by Idol on camera. Idol declined the offer by ripping up the apology. Rude and Idol would have a series of matches through March of 1984 with Idol's AWA International Heavyweight Championship on the line, and Rude being set up as a despicable person, with accusations that he was abusing Angel. Idol would retain the title throughout, though Rude did win one match by disqualification. The feud continued into April 1984 with a series of strap and strap-on-a-pole matches, all of which Idol won. Rude also lost the Loser Wears a Dress match at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis on April 16th. The feud came to a close with Idol winning a steel cage match at the Louisville Gardens on April 24th. A higher-profile feud was right around the corner for Rude as he clashed with Memphis icon Jerry Lawler over the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. Champion Lawler defended against Rude at the Mid-South Coliseum on June 11, 1984, with Angel and Rude's tag team partner Jim Neidhart at ringside. Angel and Neidhart interfered repeatedly in the match, but it looked like Lawler was going to beat the odds after the referee was knocked down and interference from Neidhart backfired. However, Angel entered the ring and allowed Rude to attack Lawler from behind, leading to a stunning victory for Rude and a title change, also marking Rude's first championship. The Southern Championship was quickly out of the picture as Rude dropped the belt to International Heavyweight Champion Tommy Rich in a title versus title match on July 16th, but the feud between Rude and Lawler continued. After defeating Lawler in a loser receives 10 lashes match at the Mid-South Coliseum on July 23rd, Rick followed that with a loss to Lawler and a strap-on-a-pole match at the same venue a week later. This time, however, Rude's manager Jimmy Hart and valet Angel came into the ring, and Rude ended up with the strap. As Lawler fought back, Lawler would give Angel a piledriver, putting her out of action. With the feud at its hottest, Rude and Hart came out to provide one of the more unusual sights on the Memphis television show. Rude told the audience that he hated Lawler so much after what he did to Angel, hurting him wasn't enough. Opening the curtain in the back of the studio, Rude opened the big bay doors leading outside to the parking lot. As fans in the studio crowded around, with some of them even getting in the ring to watch, Rude took an aluminum baseball bat and bashed Lawler's car as everything was aired on live TV. When Lawler came running from the back, Rude ran to a car being driven by his new tag team partner King Kong Bundy and made his getaway. The feud culminated in a steel cage match at the Mid-South Coliseum on August 27, 1984. Near the end of the match, Bundy came to ringside to throw a baseball bat to Rude, but Lawler ended up with it and exacted his revenge on Rude. Lawler pinned Rude to win the match. After the Lawler feud, there seemed to be some question of what to do with Rick Rude in Memphis, and the powers that be chose an unexpected route. After spending months building Rude up as an arrogant and despicable person, they tried to turn Rick Rude babyface. Rude and Bundy defeated the Fabulous Ones Stan Lane and Steve Keirn in a tournament final to crown new tag team champions on October 8, 1984. That win also gave Rude and Bundy a shot at the AWA World Tag Team Championship held by the Road Warriors. In a match on October 15th at the Mid-South Coliseum, with the referee distracted, Bundy was holding Hawk while Rude climbed to the top rope to deliver a blow to the Road Warrior. Hawk moved, causing Rude to hit Bundy instead, and leading to a Road Warrior's victory. Bundy blamed Rude, but the two worked out their differences. A week later, Bundy and Rude defended the Southern Tag Championship for the first time against the Fabulous Ones. With Rude and Keirn the legal men in the ring, Rude backed Keirn into his team's corner and threw a punch, but Keirn ducked, and again Rude ended up hitting Bundy. For a time, Bundy refused to tag into the match and left Rude to take punishment from Keirn and Lane, who had gained the upper hand. Eventually, Bundy did tag in, but still made it clear he was not happy with Rude. With the referee distracted, Rude held Lane, and Bundy came in to hit him. Lane moved, and Bundy knocked Rude flat, leading to a pinfall victory for the Fabulous Ones and a change in the title holders. After the match, Rude had an animated argument with Bundy and manager Jimmy Hart, who was clearly taking Bundy's side. Bundy attacked Rude using a chain from Hart, busting Rude's head open. The Fabulous Ones came back to the ring to chase away Bundy and Hart and end the attack. Despite pairing Rude with popular figures like Jimmy Hart and even Jerry Lawler in tag matches against Bundy and other members of Hart's first family, fans simply didn't take to a babyface Rick Rude. The feud only lasted a little over a month, ending with Rude defeating Bundy in a loser leaves town match in early December. It wouldn't be long before Rude was gone from Memphis as well, once again a heel, and landing in the Florida territory. In championship wrestling from Florida, Rude was managed by Percy Pringle and put on the fast track to the top of the card. Less than a week after making his Florida debut, Rude defeated Pistol Pez Whatley for the Florida Southern Heavyweight Championship in a televised match at the Sportatorium in Tampa. That led to a short program with Whatley as Pez tried to win the title back, but Rude managed to retain the belt while usually losing matches by disqualification. Rude defended the Southern Championship against the likes of Michael Hayes, Hector Guerrero, and several more defenses against Whatley before a series of matches against Brian Blair beginning in March 1985. Rude finally dropped the belt to Blair in another televised match at Florida Sportatorium on April 10th. Over the next week, Rude lost in 3 attempts to gain the title back, but on April 16th at the Spartan Sports Center in Tampa, Rude won gold of another kind. Rude and tag team partner Jesse Barr defeated Jay and Mark Youngblood to win the Florida version of the United States Tag Team Championship. Rude and Barr held the titles for almost 3 months, finally losing them to the team of Billy Jack Haynes and Wahoo McDaniel on July 2nd in Tampa. That started a short program between the two teams over the belts, ending in a steel cage match at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium in Orlando, with Haynes and McDaniel coming out the winners. Rude would try to get the belts back with various partners like Buddy Rose and Rip Oliver, but failed to regain the tag championship. The feud would carry over to another title when Rude regained the Florida Southern Heavyweight Championship by defeating Mike Graham on July 21st, and immediately enter into a series of defenses against Haynes. Rude successfully defended against Haynes through the remainder of July and August before his attention shifted to McDaniel in September. Wahoo finally took the Southern Championship from Rude in a televised match on October 2nd. The feud between the team of Haynes and McDaniel against Rude and other members of Percy Pringle's stable came to a close, with McDaniel defeating Rude in a title defense on October 21st in West Palm Beach. A few days later, both Rude and Pringle were on their way to Dallas and World Class Championship Wrestling. Ravishing Rick Rude made his World Class debut October 28, 1985 at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth with Percy Pringle in his corner. Rude defeated Dave Peterson in the first of a few matches against enhancement talent over the next week before facing American Heavyweight Champion Iceman King Parsons in a title match on November 11, 1985 at Will Rogers in Fort Worth. Rude would win the belt in what would prove to be a significant title change. Rude was quickly placed in main event matches, not only feuding with Parsons over the American Championship, but tagging with various partners against Kevin Carey and Lance Von Erich. Rude also played a part in one of the more unusual face turns in World Class when his stablemate The Missing Link turned against Pringle in favor of the very popular Sunshine. Rude and Pringle would later attack Link, only to be stopped by a mace-wielding Sunshine, and setting things up for an underlying conflict between Rude and anyone associated with Sunshine. Late 1985 and early 1986 was also a time of great change in professional wrestling, particularly in World Class. Rude would turn out to be the last in a long line of American heavyweight champions. With Jim Crockett Jr. in control of the National Wrestling Alliance and essentially bringing an end to the traveling world champion, World Class broke away from the NWA and created the World Class Championship Wrestling Association. As one of their first acts, they recognized the reigning American champion Rude as their first World Heavyweight Champion. It was also announced that, unlike rules under the NWA, World Class would not let the champion retain the belt if he lost the match by disqualification. Fans took particular note of this, as Rude's last defense of the American Championship ended with Rude retaining the belt, but losing the match to Lance Von Erich by disqualification. The DQ rule would not come into play in Rude's first defense of the title on the biggest stage in World Class. Rude defended the world title against Bruiser Brody at the third annual Parade of Champions on May 4, 1986 at Texas Stadium. Pringle would attempt to interfere in the match and wound up being pulled into the ring by Brody. As Rude and Brody continued the battle, it was Brody that ended up throwing Rude over the top rope, which was still an automatic disqualification. After the match, Rude and Pringle had almost made it to the tunnel to leave the field when Brody caught up to them and continued to brawl as wrestlers came from the back to break them up. In a way, Brody would get some kind of revenge on Rude for the loss, as the two made a small piece of history. The day after the Parade of Champions, Rude defeated Lance Von Erich for the World Class World Television Championship at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth, briefly making him a dual champion. 2 weeks later, Rude lost the television championship to Brody at Will Rogers after Rude was disqualified, marking the first time a championship changed hands on a disqualification. Rude held the World Championship until July 4, 1986, when his relationship with manager Percy Pringle at the very least became strained. Rude had been feuding with Chris Adams for several weeks, with Adams defeating Rude in a couple of non-title matches. Rude finally defended the World Championship against Adams at the Independence Day Star Wars card at Reunion Arena in Dallas. The physical affair that saw blood from Adams and several near pins on both sides came to a head when referee David Manning was knocked down. In what should be a familiar scenario, while Rude held Adams, Pringle climbed to the top rope and attempted to hit Adams with his cane. Pringle ended up hitting Rude instead when Adams moved, then tossed Percy out of the ring. Adams pinned Rude as Manning recovered and made the 3 count, crowning Adams as the new world champion. After the match, an apologetic Pringle was greeted with a hard shove from Rude, who then left the ring, leaving a weeping Pringle to wonder if he had lost his golden boy. Rude and Pringle would patch things up for a while, but Rude's time in World Class was drawing to an end. Rude continued the feud with Adams, though he never regained the world title. Rude's real-life sister Nancy even came into the territory briefly to serve as his valet Raven, but neither Rude or Raven would last much longer in World Class. Despite being a recent world champion, Rude seemed to be slipping down the card. A promising tag team with Dingo Warrior was brought to an abrupt end when Warrior turned face. Rude was then put in an unusual pairing with Joe LeDuc for a tournament to crown new World Tag Team Champions, losing in the first round to Mark and Chris Youngblood. It was becoming clear to Rude that it was time to move on. In October, Rude went to Jim Crockett Promotions, which consisted of the Mid-Atlantic Territory and the Georgia Territory of the NWA. With Crockett calling the shots for the National Wrestling Alliance and now the home of the NWA World Champion, it was a desirable place to be in the waning days of the territories. Now managed by Paul Jones, Rude quickly entered into a feud with his old Florida foe, Wahoo McDaniel. The two faced each other in Rude's first pay-per-view appearance, an Indian strap match at Starrcade '86. McDaniel won the match, but Rude was making noise outside the feud in the tag team division with partner Manny Fernandez. On November 30th, 1986, in a televised match on Superstation WTBS, Rude and Fernandez won the NWA World Tag Team Championship, dethroning the Rock and Roll Express consisting of Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. Rude and Fernandez feuded with Morton and Gibson for months over the titles, even facing each other in singles matches at times. Rude and Fernandez managed to keep the belts for what turned out to be a long title reign of 171 days, beating Morton and Gibson in 2 out of 3 falls matches and steel cage matches along the way. The champions also turned back challenges from Bob and Brad Armstrong, the Road Warriors, and Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff. Rude and Fernandez entered the 1987 Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament in April as the champions and the number 1 seed. However, they lost in the quarterfinals to eventual winners Rhodes and Koloff. Unfortunately, an injury to Rude put him out of action for a couple of weeks. In his absence, Ivan Koloff was brought in as a replacement, and Fernandez and Koloff lost the titles to the Rock and Roll Express. Shortly thereafter, Rude was on the move again as the World Wrestling Federation came calling. Making his WWF debut on June 7, 1987 with a win over Jose Estrada at a house show at Arco Arena in Sacramento, California, Rude was part of Bobby Heenan's stable of wrestlers. Spending the first month making the house show circuit, Rude racked up several wins over enhancement talent as he added a little spice to his presentation. Changing his entrance music from Smooth Operator to The Stripper, before every match, Rude asked the sound man to cut the music before telling all the fat, out-of-shape meatheads to quiet down so he could show the ladies what a real man looks like. The music would resume as Rude slowly slipped off his robe to reveal his muscular body and swiveling hips, usually adorned with tights featuring his own face. His pompous introduction immediately raised the ire of the crowd, even if there were some of the ladies that didn't mind it so much. Brought along slowly at first, Rude spent several weeks mostly working house shows, but making sporadic television appearances, tagging with other Heenan family members like Harley Race and his old Memphis tag team partner King Kong Bundy. By October, Rude was appearing more regularly on television and began feuding with former Heenan family member Paul Orndorff. Though Orndorff defeated Rude in a steel cage match at the Maple Leaf Gardens, Rude did take the win in several other house shows, including a lumberjack match in Phoenix and another steel cage match in Providence. The victories against the established WWF star helped Rude gain credibility and helped set things up for what was arguably his most famous feud. After a couple of unsuccessful bids to win the WWF World Championship from Hulk Hogan in January 1988, Rude had a great series of house show matches against Ricky Steamboat and began picking up wins against notable talent like Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana. Rude also added a little something to his shtick. After defeating an opponent, Rude would pick out a lady in the crowd and bring her to the center of the ring to give her a rude awakening. In this case, unlike his neckbreaker finishing maneuver of the same name, Rude would give the woman a kiss. On March 19, 1988, at the Show Me Center in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Rude made quick work of Reno Riggins for a TV taping of WWF Superstars before asking manager Bobby Heenan to help pick a woman from the crowd. They both spotted a beautiful woman wearing white in the front and asked her to come into the ring. She refused, which was the first time that had happened. After some unsuccessful coaxing from the ring, Rude finally went to ringside to talk directly to the woman. She told Rude she wasn't there to see him. Her name was Cheryl Roberts, and she was there to see her husband, who happened to be Jake the Snake Roberts. Rude then insulted Jake and called his wife a lowlife for being with him, leading to Roberts' wife standing up and slapping him. Rude then got physical with her and grabbed her wrist before Roberts came from the back and attacked Rude. The two brawled all the way back to the dressing room as other wrestlers came out to break them up. Rude and Roberts would actually meet in the ring 8 days later during WrestleMania 4 at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, but because of the way the WWF aired their television show, nobody outside Cape Girardeau had seen the situation at the Show Me Center. The match actually drew a lot of criticism for having way too many rest holds, and it ended in a standard time limit draw. Once the Show Me Center confrontation aired, Rude and Roberts feuded throughout the summer, having memorable matches at house shows and dark matches at televised events, but the most memorable moment came outside the matches themselves. Rude began wearing a pair of tights with Cheryl Roberts' face airbrushed on them, and was warned by Roberts to never wear them again. At a TV taping on August 23rd in Providence, Rude defeated Tommy Angel in about a minute and a half, wearing plain tights. After the match, he tore away the plain tights to reveal a second pair of tights underneath, with Cheryl Roberts' face on them. Jake came running from the back, to a huge pop from the crowd, and ripped Rude's Cheryl-clad tights off. Rude was censored on television to make it appear he was stripped naked, but he was actually wearing a pair of flesh-colored shorts underneath the tights. Despite the incredible fan reaction to the feud, it sputtered to a payoff on Saturday night's main event, taped on October 25, 1988 in Baltimore, Maryland, with Roberts winning by disqualification. Years later, Roberts suspected the powers that be felt Rude and Roberts were taking too much attention away from the Mega Powers storyline and brought the feud to an abrupt end. Ironically, it would be at WrestleMania 5 on April 2, 1989, carrying the tagline "The Mega Powers Explode," where Rude would win his first championship in the WWF. Rude defeated the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship, kickstarting a program between Rude and his former Dingo Warrior tag partner from World Class. Almost every match Rude had for the next 4 months was an Intercontinental title defense against the Warrior as the two crisscrossed the country in house shows. Rude did squeeze in a few other title defenses against the likes of Jim Neidhart and Brutus Beefcake, but mostly spent the summer building up to SummerSlam. On August 28, 1989, in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Warrior regained the title thanks to Roddy Piper coming to ringside and distracting Rude by lifting his kilt and mooning him, allowing Warrior to set up the winning pinfall. Rude never got a rematch against Warrior for the Intercontinental title and immediately went into a program with Piper. This may have lowered Rude's stock with WWF fans, as Rude and Piper made the house show circuit, with every match for 2 months ending in either a double countout or Rude winning by disqualification, though Rude's team did defeat Piper's team at Survivor Series 1989. Through the end of 1989 and into 1990, Piper regularly beat Rude in steel cage and lumberjack matches. The feud just sort of fizzled out, with the final match between the two being at a house show in New Orleans. After relatively short programs with Jimmy Snuka and Big Boss Man, Rude reignited his feud with the new WWF World Champion Ultimate Warrior in a long series of title matches through the summer of 1990, as well as a series of tag matches that teamed Rude with Mr. Perfect against Warrior and Kerry Von Erich, mixing the two feuds in one match. The second program with Warrior peaked with a steel cage match at SummerSlam 1990 in Philadelphia, with Rude unable to win the belt. Unhappy with the direction they were going, Rude left the WWF, spending a good deal of time in Japan through the summer of 1991. Rude then emerged in World Championship Wrestling, making an unusual return. At Halloween Havoc on October 27, 1991 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Paul E. Dangerously introduced the Mystery Man to face off against Tom Zink. Introduced as the WCW Phantom, the Mystery Man, wearing a black and white mask and solid black ring gear, made short work of Zink and won the match in less than 2 minutes. In a promo after the match, Dangerously declared the man behind the mask was there to take the United States Heavyweight Championship from Sting. His valet Medusa by his side, the man then unmasked to reveal that it was Rick Rude. As part of a dangerous alliance packed with talent that would include Medusa, Larry Zbyszko, Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, and Bobby Eaton, Rude quickly established himself as the cornerstone of the stable. Rude defeated Sting for the United States Heavyweight Championship at Clash of Champions on November 19, 1991, to begin a title reign that lasted over a year, as well as a lengthy feud with Sting over the title. Sting challenged Rude for the U.S. title 22 times over the next several weeks, with Rude coming away with the belt every time. The two also faced off in a short series of non-title steel cage matches in March 1992, with Rude winning in Chicago, Illinois, and Inglewood, California, and Sting taking the win in Oakland, California. Rude and Sting also faced off in tag team matches, with Rude teaming with various members of the Dangerous Alliance, while Sting partnered with the likes of Dustin Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, and Rick and Scott Steiner. Rude also made several other title defenses, including a great match against Ricky Steamboat at Super Bowl II in Milwaukee. The same card, Sting defeated Lex Luger for the WCW World Championship. The Rude vs. Sting feud then shifted its attention to the WCW World title through the end of March 1992, with Rude as the challenger and Sting as the champion, but Rude never won the belt. After a great program with Steamboat over the U.S. title, Rude then had a lengthy feud with Nikita Koloff over the belt that included steel cage and death matches, Rude made his last successful defense of that U.S. title reign against Eric Watts in a televised match on WCW Saturday night before a legitimate injury put him out of action for 3 months. Due to the injury, Rude was forced to officially surrender the title on January 1, 1993, and end the reign at 409 days. Returning from the injury in March, Rude eased back into things with some house show victories and spent most of the spring tagging with Paul Orndorff. By summer, Rude would begin a program with Dustin Rhodes over the United States Championship when Rude defeated Rhodes, but the WCW Board of Directors announced the title would be held up when they determined that neither wrestler's shoulders were pinned to the mat when the count was made. That led to a best-of-3 series between Rude and Rhodes, with the final match being held August 30, 1993 in Atlanta on WCW Saturday night. Ric Flair was doing commentary at ringside with Tony Schiavone and Jesse Ventura. Flair and Rude were already at odds over Rude's appearance on a Flair for the Gold when Rude set his sights on Flair's maid Fifi and was rudely rejected. Rude then attacked Flair, hitting him from behind with the big gold belt. Flair was scheduled to defend what was then referred to as the WCW International World Championship against Rude at Fall Brawl 3 weeks after Rude's match against Rhodes. After the referee was knocked down during an attempted bulldog by Rhodes, Rude climbed out of the ring and grabbed a metal chair. Flair decided to intervene and took the chair out of Rude's hands, allowing Rhodes to come up behind him and roll him up for the win. Rhodes was once again U.S. champion, and a little extra flavor was added to the match between Rude and Flair at Fall Brawl, which turned out to carry a small piece of historical significance. The WCW International World Championship was a title born from confusion. Even though WCW had officially withdrew from the National Wrestling Alliance on September 1, 1993, the NWA continued to recognize WCW's International World Champion as the NWA World Champion. At Fall Brawl, held at Astro Arena in Houston, Texas on September 19th, Rude defeated Ric Flair with the help of some brass knuckles for the WCW International World Championship, and thus also became the NWA World Champion. Almost. The NWA Board of Directors objected to the title changing hands without their vote, and did not recognize the title change. The final loose ties between WCW and the NWA were officially severed. Rude defended the International World title against Flair in several rematches, including at Halloween Havoc 1993 in New Orleans that, for some reason, had Terry Taylor as a special second referee. The match itself was a fast-paced, physical match, but ended in more controversy. Flair used a set of brass knuckles of his own to knock Rude out, and was about to pin him with Taylor making the count, but referee Randy Anderson stepped in and disqualified Flair. Rude would hold the WCW International World title for 178 days before losing in Tokyo to Hiroshi Hayes during the Tour of Japan in March 1994. Rude regained the title in Kyoto, Japan before returning to the United States and dropping the belt again to Sting at Spring Stampede on April 17th in Rosemont, Illinois. Rude would win the title back just 18 days later, but it would come at a price. On another tour of Japan on May 1, 1994, Rude challenged Sting for the WCW International World Championship in Fukuoka, Japan. It was an incredible match, but with Rude on the outside of the ring, Sting did an over-the-top rope splash on Rude, sending both men falling over a raised area around the ring. Rude hit the edge awkwardly, severely injuring his back. Amazingly, Rude was able to finish the match, even doing moves off the top rope, and pinned Sting to regain the International World title. It would turn out to be Rude's last official match. Rude's back injury was so severe he was forced to retire from in-ring action at just 35 years old. In the blink of an eye, one of the most entertaining and flamboyant wrestlers was gone from the profession, but Rude wasn't completely done with pro wrestling just yet. Almost 3 years after Rude was forced to retire, a masked man started showing up in Extreme Championship Wrestling in January 1997 and harassing ECW World Television Champion Shane Douglas. In what may have been the worst-kept secret in wrestling at the time, the masked man was immediately identified by ECW fans as Rude. Eventually, Rude would unmask and join Joey Styles on commentary as the color commentator. Even though he was no longer actively wrestling, Rude's cockiness was still the same, with a little extra emphasis thanks to the ECW presentation. Rude eventually turned heel and aligned himself with Douglas as an advisor to the Triple Threat stable. In August, Rude suddenly jumped ship and returned to the WWF, Playing the part of sort of a bodyguard, Rude would be in on the ground floor of the stable that became D-Generation X, along with Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna. Appearing without a WWF contract and being paid on a per-appearance handshake agreement, that fact led to Rude again being a small part of history in pro wrestling. Rude was a longtime friend of the Hart family, and particularly Bret Hart. Hart, who was the WWF champion at the time, was on his way out of the company after signing a contract with WCW. This led to the infamous Montreal Screwjob at the November 9, 1997 Survivor Series pay-per-view, when Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels double-crossed Hart to get the WWF title off of him and onto Michaels. Angry at what took place, Rude called WCW Senior Vice President Eric Bischoff and negotiated a deal, telling nobody in the WWF he was leaving. On November 17, 1997, Rick Rude appeared on the live broadcast of WCW's Monday Night Nitro, while a taped Raw is War was aired for the WWF at the same time, which, roughly an hour later, also featured an appearance by Rude. That makes Rick Rude the only person to appear on both Monday Night Nitro and Raw is War on the same night. As a side note, because of a working relationship between the WWF and ECW, Rude also appeared on a taped episode of ECW's Hardcore TV the previous weekend, making him the only person to appear for all three companies' TV shows in the same week. Rude became a member of the New World Order, also making him the first person to be part of both D-Generation X and the NWO. Rude served as manager for his childhood friend Curt Hennig as the two went back and forth between NWO Black and White and NWO Black and Red. By late 1998, both Rude and Hennig were off WCW television, with Hennig nursing a leg injury and Rude having a cancer scare that turned out to be an incorrect diagnosis. Hennig would return, but Rude officially left WCW in April 1999. Days after leaving WCW, and with rumors that he was preparing for an in-ring return circulating, the pro wrestling world was shocked and saddened when the news came out that Rick Rude had been found dead by his wife in their Georgia home. The official cause of death was declared to be heart failure. An autopsy revealed that the heart failure was brought on by an overdose of mixed medications, including a narcolepsy prevention drug. Rude was only 40 years old at the time of his death. Rick Rude's wrestling personality was that of a narcissistic, womanizing heel. In his everyday life, Richard Rude was a devoted family man that refused to take off his wedding band, covering it with a piece of tape in the ring. Rude had a reputation for being a legitimate tough guy most people wouldn't want to face in a real fight, but was also known to be a doting father to his 3 children, managing to show up for as many school activities as possible despite his heavy traveling schedule. Rude was also loyal to his friends. In the dying days of the Territories, Percy Pringle found himself unemployed and struggling living in Dallas. It was Rude that planted the seed to bring Pringle to the WWF as pallbearer and reinvigorated his old manager's career. Behind the scenes, Rude had earned the respect of his friends and peers, as well as the fans who booed him. That respect was put front and center in 2017, when Rude was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
You know I did, Mark Lowrance. Now next Monday night, I want you to draw the camera in real close and take a look at the finest body in all of professional sports, because I'm going to be taking on a man called Wingo, Jingo, Bingo, Dingo, I don't care what your name is. Come next Monday night, you're going to know what my game is, and that's beating people up.